Welcome to NYLA On Demand. This session was previously recorded for the NYLA 2020 virtual conference, and it will be available to you through December 31st. Please note, once viewed, each on-demand program is eligible for one continuing education credit, CEU. Links to the materials and presenter contact information have been archived and will be available to you after the conference. Any questions about the NYLA 2020 virtual conference digital platform can be directed to marketing@nyla.org, or you can call 1-800-252-6952. Storytelling Off the Page is sponsored by the Youth Service section. Welcome to our presenter, Jessica Espejel.
Hi, everyone. So welcome to Storytelling Off the Page. Again, I'm Jessica Espejel, and I'm from the New York Public Library. I'm really excited that you're tuning in today because we're going to have a lot of fun exploring new ways to make stories come to life for your little learners at Storytime. So let's get started. Now, a little bit about myself. I am one of 4 early literacy coordinators in the Early Childhood Education Department at the New York Public Library. So as a coordinator, I support and train librarians in Manhattan and in the Bronx on early literacy and early childhood services. I also help librarians in developing and facilitating informal programs intended for families with children 0 to 5 years old, like story time, baby lap sits, dramatic play programs, and process art activities. I've been a children's librarian now for 6 years in a public library setting. I do have a master's in library science, but I also have a bachelor's in English and creative writing, which is just another reason why I love telling and creating stories. This is my first time presenting at NYLA, so I'm very excited for that and grateful that I can be with you here today. So let's look at the agenda. First, there is a brief introduction to Storymakers and Shakers. This is the program that I created at New York Public Library that incorporated all the concepts and techniques that I will be sharing with you today. Then I will do actual story demonstrations so you can see these stories in actions. And then I will also break down what are the materials that I used to do these stories. Next, I'm going to have some recommendations of some picture book titles that work really well with these techniques, though you really could use any picture book in your collection. Then we will end with some Q&A. If anybody has questions, I will have my information at the end for you. So how did this all start? Let's jump to, yes, the year 2017, which feels really long ago. I was promoted to the early literacy team, and I observed a training from an outside expert that was all about engaging young learners with the whole body, so using movement and activating the senses to boost storytime participation. So as you can see, these are my actual notes from that day. I was truly inspired, and I took a lot of this information to heart. And afterwards, I was approached by other librarian colleagues who wanted help on how to recreate some of the more intricate activities that were presented during the training. So that summer, I got to tinkering and I created the Storymakers and Shakers program as a special early literacy session that would be both a story time and a parent workshop. So this allowed library staff to model the activities during story time and then encouraged parents to make their own storytelling props for themselves during the workshop. So I planned it as a 4-part series, and I created a lesson plan, facilitated training, provided all the materials, and then distributed it to 30 branches who would run the program over the summer. So this was a centrally organized program, but staff-led at the branches. Now, before creating the lesson plan, I wanted staff to have these 3 main goals in mind. So I wanted them to get curious, right? I wanted them to ask, what are different ways to tell a story? And how can we use the whole body and the world around us to tell it? Then I wanted them to get flexible, right? And think of different ways to adapt a read aloud for young learners while also empowering parents and themselves to tell stories with minimal resources. So this is a big thing, especially in the day now, where read alouds might be a little bit long and too long for a young learner to understand, or the concept's a little complicated. So adapting and simplifying would make things easier for a young learner to still hear a story that they would maybe not heard at story time. And then minimal resources, as we know, it is difficult if you're quarantining and you're at home and you don't have all the supplies that you usually have at the branch or usually have because of other things. So utilizing any material in your house can actually be really helpful to then create a story. Then I wanted our librarians to be the content. So stories are best told when we are in it. And what are ways to make stories then more interactive and engaging, not just for our listeners, but also for us as the reader? So one of the ways that we found most useful and engaging to put all these concepts together was to use props, right? I had used props plenty of times as a librarian. I had puppets, I had scarves, I had shakers, but for the most part, there were props that only the audience used. And then there were only props that I used. And I made sure that there wasn't a lot of mixing going on. Whereas the props I'm going to show you now are things that everybody, both the children, the parents, and ourselves can use together to build the story. All right, we're now going to do some demonstrations. So here are some of the props that we used to adapt the picture books in our collection for this kind of interactive story time. The first one being story rope and bags, and it looks a lot like this. So this is the story rope and bag. The rope was just a simple kind of thick cord, and then in between we laced canvas bags in order for our librarians to hang them up during story time, tape them onto a table, or tie them up to chairs. And we would have between 3 or 6 bags in between for that story time. So what is wonderful about using the story rope and bag is how easy it is to retell stories that follow a sequential pattern. Because the rope, sorry, this is New York for you. So the rope acts as a timeline for the story, because then you can establish the beginning, the middle, and the ends. And the bags then act as a new change in the story, like if you reveal from one bag a new character, or you can reveal a change in the event of the story. Now, we do this a lot already in flannel stories, if you're already using flannel stories. But what makes the story bags different is that children are encouraged to be the narrators. They are encouraged to come, reach into the bag, and reveal the next chain of events. So ultimately, it's the children and the parents who are propelling the story forward. So the items in the bag can be literal, or they can be conceptual. And you can get the audience actively involved in thinking how these items are important to the story structure. So one picture book, as you can see in the bottom, that works well is The Enormous Potato by Aubrey Davis. Now, I will be telling this story, and I normally tell this story with my official story rope and bag, but alas, I made some last minute living changes, which unexpectedly put some props in storage. So instead of fretting and worrying, I figured this is the perfect time to show you how you literally can take anything from your home and turn it into a story tool. So if you haven't heard the story before, now you will, because I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that for you. Okay, so if that worked technology-wise, I am going to start. So one day, there was a farmer, and the farmer came out and put on his scarf on a cold March day to plant something. He wanted to plant in his garden a little eye. But this is not a human eye. This is a potato eye. And the potato eye, hopefully, in the ground will grow a very big potato. So he came out to his garden and he put it in the ground. Can you help me? We're going to dig, dig, dig. We're going to put it in the ground and we're going to put the soil back on and we're going to give it some water. Let's help the farmer give it some water. And let's help the sun give it some warmth. And let's go ahead and wait because things like this, like plants, take time. So we're going to wait. But the farmer also had an idea. The farmer thought, wouldn't it be nice to try to make this an enormous potato? And let's help the potato by singing it a little song. So he had a special box. Do you know what was in this special box? Ooh, it's something hard. It's clearly something small. Let's see what he used to help sing to the potato. Oh, it looks like it's a music box. And he started to play his song. Wow, how wonderful. So every day the farmer came out and he would turn his music instrument. Can you help me do that? Turn his music instrument and sang his little eye a lullaby until one day he looked out the window and saw a plant. Oh, that must be the potato. So he got very excited. He went out, he grabbed the plant, and he pulled and he pulled and he pulled. Oh, but the potato didn't come out. So the farmer thought, I need some help. Let's see where we can find help. Now I have a special apron with pockets that gives us clues on who's going to come and help the farmer. So let's look in our first bag. Hey, these are silver bracelets. Who do you think in the story wears silver bracelets? The farmer's wife. And she was in the kitchen drinking some coffee. Until the farmer said, Yoo-hoo! Darling, can you come and help? So out came the farmer's wife, who grabbed onto the farmer, who grabbed onto the plant, and they pulled and they pulled and they pulled. Oh, but the potato didn't come out. So let's see who is going to help next. In our second pocket, we have Bubbles. Who in the story do you think would have bubbles? Yes, it's the farmer's daughter. She was out in the garden blowing bubbles when the farmer said, Yoo-hoo, darling, can you come and help? So the daughter, with her bubbles, came and held on to her mother, the father's wife, who held on to the farmer, who held on to the plant, and they pulled and they pulled and they pulled. Ooh, but the potato didn't come out. So let's see who is the third person who can help, the third character. What could this be? Oh, so silly. You know who it is? These are the ears of the dog, the farmer's dog. And the farmer's dog was running around going woof, 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 woof. And the farmer said, Yoo-hoo, darling, can you come and help? And here came the dog, who held on to the daughter, who held on to the farmer's wife, who held on to the farmer, who held on to the plant, and they pulled and they pulled and they pulled until pop, there was one big potato. And it looked so good that that night they cut it up and made potato soup. And they were all very happy. The end. Now, as you can see, everyone, I'm going to break down all these silly props that I had. This is my bracelet. I had some bubbles, so I thought that would be perfect for the daughter. This is actually a contraption I made. This is my yoga mat handle. These are some stuffing from a pillow and masking tape because I don't have a mask or I don't have like a little dog something. So I was like, these are perfect for the dog's ears. And what's nice is as you create these items, if you're in person, then it's the kids or the parents that can then put on these things and be in the chain of pulling the potato. If you're doing this virtually, as you can see, then you can become all of the characters in the story as it starts to develop. All right, so let's go ahead and put this away and move on to the next prop. Okay, so the next prop is story panels and boxes. So what I mean by story panels and boxes, I have different materials, but what's really great, much like the rope and the bags, panels and boxes are materials that can be easily layered or stacked and allow the storyteller to reveal new events of a story with easy transition. So here is a story panel. So this is a transparency sheet, which is something that you can find easily at any office supply store. And on it, I drew with chalk marker a tree, but this is the base of a tree for the book Tap the Magic Tree by Christy Matheson. So if you don't know the story, it's already a very interactive story. And turning the pages, you watch as the tree goes through the changes of the season from having rubbing the tree in order for the flowers to bloom, shaking the tree for the apples to fall. So all these things are interactive. What's great about having the transparency sheet is that it's very light. It's very easy to transport if you're doing outreach or if you're encouraging parents to keep it in the stroller. It also can be easily wiped and turned into a new story. So I'm going to show you how each layer then, if you have a base, each layer can turn into a new part of the story. So here I have my tree now with lush leaves. My tree in the middle has flowers and some birds popping up. And then my last tree is all about winter and snow. So encouraging the kids then to do the transition of the layers and then parents making their own stories out of it is a really fun workshop project. So we had some really amazing artists in our training. Our staff are really amazing, and I wanted to showcase some of the ones that they did. So this here was from a librarian at George Bruce Library, and it's called We're Going on a Bear Hunt by Michael Rawson. So you may have already known this, but she drew this by hand, no tracing, no anything. And then afterwards, each layer had the wavy grass and then the rushing river. So I thought this was a really great example of a story that she knows well and that families know well, and being able to see the layers as it happens there. Another really great example came from a librarian at Tompkins Square Library. So if you haven't heard this book, it's called Not a Stick by Antoinette Portis. And it's all about a pig that has a stick. And every time he says, this is not a stick, this is a fishing rod. And so as you can see with the layers, the first layer shows the pig and the stick in black. So this is the reality. And then the layer on top with color is actually the imagination. So when I saw this, I was like, this is amazing. And what's really nice is that the librarian is not an artist. Instead, she actually put the transparency sheet on top of the book and traced around it. So that actually was a nice thing, that if you're not a great artist or you don't feel really comfortable, doing that, you can always take some of your favorite books and lie it on a transparency sheet on top and draw from there. So that's another example. Now, I'm going to actually do a reading of a book that you probably already know. There we go. So I'm going to show you how you can do this in front of an audience. Again, it can be in person or virtually, starting with my buddy, Pete the cat. Now, as you can see, sometimes because the transparency sheet can be a little shiny, if you're doing this virtually, to be careful with, the glare and everything. But this is a drawing of Pete the cat that I did. But it also, if you don't have transparency sheets or have issues trying to get them, this is a page protector. So this is just a paper protector from a binder that you can also use instead. So there are different types of transparency tools that you can use that doesn't just rely on the sheets. Okay, so this is my buddy, Pete the cat. Woo! And he has some very white shoes. He loved his white shoes that he would walk around, sing his song until one day, whoops, Pete stepped in a pile of blueberries. Oh no! Did he cry? Goodness no. What color are his shoes? They're blue, but that's okay, because he kept walking along and singing his song until, uh-oh, he stepped in a pile of strawberries. Now what color are Pete's shoes? They're red. Did he cry? Goodness no. He kept walking along and singing his song until he stepped in a pile of mud. Now, what color are Pete's shoes? They're brown and they're dirty. Did Pete cry? Goodness no. He kept walking along and singing his song until there was a pool of water and he splashed right in. And the water washed all the mud and all the strawberries and all the blueberries until Pete's shoes were white again. But this time they were all wet. As you can see, he's got little droplets on it. Did Pete cry? Goodness no. He kept walking along and singing his song all day long. The end. Now, Pete the cat already is a fun story that everybody knows. But as you can see, I did simplify it just a little bit more for the transition of the book, of my storytelling. Just to simplify it a little bit more for our young learners, so that when they get a little bit older and they read the book, the concept is already all there for them. Awesome. So let's go ahead and move to the next prop. Here we go. Okay, so these are the story boxes. Now, boxes everybody has, right? Everybody has boxes, tissue boxes, shoe boxes, package boxes that came from delivery, boxes everywhere. So let's think of some ways then that boxes can turn into a story. So one of my favorite books of all time is A Dog is a Dog by Stephen Shafskin. So the concept that I was thinking about, that yes, you can use boxes, have characters or events and build up, either stack them up or stack them over. But what's really nice about A Dog is a Dog, that it's all about this dog with an identity crisis, and every turn of the page, he is something else. So it's actually a nesting concept in this book. And so I wondered, if the boxes could nest also to reveal what the next character this dog will be. So now I'm gonna go ahead and show you what that looks like. So I did manage to have this prop here with me. And this I'm gonna break down and tell you this is felt. So this is felt for you felt people. This is also felt so that this can stick and change into different characters. And then inside there are other items. So a dog is a dog, whether it's naughty or nice, whether it suns in the beach or glides on the ice. A dog is a dog, whether it's skinny or fat. A dog is a dog, unless it's a cat. Hey, so he was a cat. Well, a cat is a cat, whether it hisses or purrs, whether it's hairless and cold or wrapped up in furs. A cat is a cat if it did, didn't, or did. A cat is a cat unless it's a squid. What is going on here? Well, I guess a squid is a squid, whether it swims fast or swims slow, whether it wiggles up high or wiggles down low. A squid is a squid in the clear or in the fog. A squid is a squid, unless it's a, who is it? A dog. He was a dog the whole time. The end. So let's break this down again. This is a toilet paper tube with a little bit of a command hook there, so that I can have the felt. And then all of the items on top of the smaller boxes is actually just, again, the plastic sleeve, so that if you wanted to change out the characters or the themes of this story, you can, so that it's flexible in that sense and not permanent. So yeah, so this was something that we tried out in the branches to see how the kids saw everything come from a dog and then get smaller and smaller. And then also build out and remember how the story went, because it really, this cat can only fit in this box, right? And so there was a lot of mixing and matching happening with our friends there. Awesome. Let's go ahead now and move to the next prop. Okay. Now, when I say prop for being the story, this really can involve any type of prop to allow you to be the character without really dressing up the part like Halloween. There's no need to really dress up like Pete the Cat or anything like that. You can, of course, but if you could do something that is even more interactive other than dressing up, wouldn't that be better? So one of the things that was rolling around in my head was the book Joseph Had a Little Overcoat. When I would read this book with the children, sometimes the concept of turning a coat into a jacket, into a vest, went above some of my little ones' heads. And there are definitely felt versions that show this transformation. But then I got to thinking, how can we make this then a group activity? And how can the librarian then be more a part of the story? So the idea was brought up to make the coat out of paper, and kids would come and tear the pieces off. So I got to working on creating a butcher paper overcoat for this activity. Now I don't have my butcher paper overcoat here, but I am going to give you a step-by-step guide on how you can make your own right now. So first off, you need to make sure you have a large piece of butcher paper that can literally wrap around your body. So long enough for your torso, wrap around your body just like Justin Timberlake over here. And once you're ready with that piece of butcher paper, you're going to fold it in half. So this image shows that butcher paper already folded, and you have to fold it lengthwise just to make sure you get that. So once you have it folded, you're gonna draw a really long line and then the letter U. And so just a really long Y, basically. Then you're gonna cut through both of the pieces that are folded. You're gonna cut through and make sure that you leave that piece, the little part of the U, open, so that you tape the longer part down with masking tape, so that the U stays open, everything else is closed up, and now you got yourself an overcoat. So this is my colleague Chelsea, who is modeling this overcoat that we made. So as you can see by the side, there is a sleeve that then you can have the kids tear off once you get to the vest part. There's enough space for you to be able to cut and tear and tear and tear. And one of my favorite things about this activity was that as the kids were coming up and doing the tearing, some of them, maybe the tear was not perfect, whatever. But what was nice was as you kept on tearing and having smaller parts from the vest to the scarf, to the tie, to the button, is that all the extra pieces, the kids were grabbing and wearing it themselves. Which was really, really nice, is that afterwards now you have all this shredded paper that then turns into a pretend prop for the children afterwards. Now, like I said, I don't have that, but I do have another example of a story at which you can be the canvas and that you can then model the story and have people come and use the props. So this is an inspiration from I Ain't Gonna Paint No More by Karen Beaumont. And at the library, I do have a brush, a paintbrush. I have a bunch of colored scarves, and then I put them in this little container, and that's where I bring out the paint in order to paint for this story. Now I'm going to demonstrate here how you can use household items to make this if you don't have a paintbrush or just want to really be minimal about this. Oh, okay. All right. So here is my paintbrush. And my paintbrush lets me put some paint and paint everything I want. So one day with my paintbrush, I decided to paint the wall, the ceiling, my bed, every part of my room until my mom came in and said, "What a mess." She took my brush and said, "No more, you promise. You ain't gonna paint no more, no more. You ain't gonna paint no more." So I said, "Okay, I promise." So the next day, I was thinking, what should I do? I really want to paint, maybe just a little bit. So I get my brush and I'm gonna dip, dip, dip it into some orange paint. And I think I'm going to paint. My mom said, not the room and not the house. So I'm gonna paint my shoulder. Oh, uh-oh. What a mess. I promised. So I'm gonna sing my song again. I ain't gonna paint no more, no more. I ain't gonna paint no more. Okay, maybe a little bit more. So I'm going to dip, dip, dip. And now I have green paint. And I think I want to paint my other shoulder. Paint, paint, paint. Uh-oh. What a mess. I promised. So now, I ain't gonna paint no more, no more. I ain't gonna paint no more. Okay, Maybe one more time because now it's my favorite color. Dip, dip, dip. My favorite color is purple and I want to paint my head. Uh-oh. What a mess. I painted my shoulder. I painted my other shoulder and I painted my head. Can you help me clean up? You're gonna give me some water. Oh, thank you. You can give me some soap. Thank you, thank you. And let's go ahead and rub our hands together and we're going to clean up, clean up, clean up. Thank you. The end. So as you can see, this is actually a fork, a disposable fork with a tissue that I just kind of taped around. And then each of my brushes then turned into each color. So this is a paper napkin. And then I have here, this is felt. So again, with a disposable fork, I just wrapped around some felt in order to paint. So any of these things work if you have them at home. And when you're virtually, as you can see, you can do that. When you're in person, what's really nice is then everybody can have a chance to grab one of the paintbrushes and help you paint. So, and then this becomes a sensory tool also, because afterwards, as the props are out, parents and kids can then paint themselves and retell the story together. Wonderful. So let's move back onto the PowerPoint. Awesome. So here I demonstrated a lot of fun and engaging stories, and that's great. But I've also demonstrated some components of literacy and learning that you may not have realized. So let's break that down. Each and every story and prop we discussed easily falls into one or more of these categories. So we called them story layers. Every story has a layer of a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whether it's a picture book, whether it's War and Peace, whether it's any type of story, we've deconstructed that there are layers. We've also identified a sequence and a pattern of a story, which is a math concept, but also something that reoccurs in every story structure. And what's great is that once we identify the sequence and the pattern and put them in those categories based in the bags or on the transparency sheets, then it makes it easier for kids to also follow along themselves and build out the stories themselves too. This is great for repetition as well as memorization. Now, we've also developed space, an awareness of space, and all of this is math concepts. So identifying adding, as in from the enormous potato, we are adding a new character into the story in order to develop. We are subtracting, which we did when we were subtracting our boxes for the dog is a dog, or subtracting from pieces of the overcoat. We had a lot of different shapes that we do, in particular, if you have any of these materials, right? And then scaling is something that is a very hard concept sometimes that is harder to notice when you're in a two-dimensional page of a book, whereas scaling with props, you can go from big and small to big easily. And then there's a lot of spatial awareness, right? There's a lot of things that make things go farther away or closer, things that then you have to realize how you can work around the story within the space that you are in. So definitely these ideas are great for visual interpretation and then open up that interpretation of difficult concepts for kids. And then we talked about being the story, right? So if you're the narrator, then you are the canvas and the audience is the one who is the artist, right? They're the creator here. So there's a lot of pretend play. There's a lot of audience engagement happening. And this fosters that social emotional development for both the caregiver and the child, and building the relationship that you want also out of what they see in the library. Awesome. So now let's talk about books, right? Because that was one of the things that actually was a little difficult for our librarians. It's like, okay, we have these props, we have our ideas, but where are we finding the books? So here are some amazing picture books that work well with the StoryMakers method. Okay, so recommended titles for story layering. These are some titles that not only are diverse, but also just really fun to experiment with. So the Wheels on the Tuk-Tuk. Wheels on the Tuk-Tuk was it's much like Wheels on the Bus. And it involves a lot about not just the transportation of the tuk-tuk, but also the development of the setting of this very busy city in India. And so there's a lot of adding, but there's also a lot of layers that are happening within it. Alma and How She Got Her Name by Juana Martinez Neal. This is really great about a little girl that has so many names. I think it's like Alma, Josefina, Isabella, all these different names, and she doesn't like it. But then her father starts to reveal how each name that she has is reflective on an ancestor, and why this name and the ancestor is so important in her identity. So if you had like the story bags, then you can have each name and how each name has a story behind it, which would be really cool, especially for Hispanic families that also have something to tell about their names. Hush, a Thai Lullaby, if you haven't heard about it, it's all about a little family in Thailand that is saying goodnight to all of the animals that before the little one goes to sleep. So I could keep on going. These are all really great titles. I hope you can find them in your collection. Moving forward, we have story layering of more kind of fun, cutesy ones. So much like the Tap the Magic Tree, Christy Matheson has Touched the Brightest Star, which I think would be really wonderful in these transparency panels. Not a Box and Not a Stick. So the example of the Not a Stick earlier, there's also one about Not a Box, so that's a really great one. And Tiptoe Joe was actually my first book inspiration for a layer, because it's all about Joe the bear who's tiptoeing around the forest and telling all the animals to hush, but to follow him. So there's a new layer of a new animal that's following him until they all make it into a cave where he reveals that he has a newborn baby bear. So that was kind of the first one, and when I slowly noticed that, I started finding other books that work well. So story space. Like I said, you can use any props on this, and these are some really great books that incorporate a lot of that. Maya's Blanket, which is also in Spanish, La Manta de Maya, is just like Joseph had a little overcoat, but it's her blanket. And her blanket is all colorful and beautiful, but it starts to wear, so it turns into a dress, which then turns into a skirt, then turns into a bufanda, which is a scarf, and then so on and so forth. Other ones that I want to highlight is Big Bug. It's my favorite book, and it's all about a big bug, but this big bug is a little bug when he's on a big flower. And then this big flower is a little flower when it's next to a big tree. But this tree is a little tree when it's big in the sky. The sky is very big, and then it keeps on going down from there. So there's a lot of that kind of space awareness that something is big to something else, but little in comparison to another thing. Grandma's Tiny House. I love Grandma's Tiny House for also layers, but about space, because Grandma's Tiny House, everyone's coming to visit. So it's all the cousins, all the aunts and uncles, and each one of them have something that multiply of food, of music, this and that. And so it goes from big into Grandma's tiny house, and then it opens back up all over again. And so being able to show all of that is really great. As well as it looked like spilt milk, which I thought would be also a very good example of the tearing of the paper, that if you tore some paper and you had them out and you had all of the audience ask, you know, what does this look like? And then you can build off of there. Finally, recommendations on how to be the story. So one of my favorite viewings of an author talk was actually by Grace Lynn. She read A Big Mooncake for Little Star, which if you haven't seen the book, I highly recommend it. But what was really fantastic is with the children here in the city, she talked about we're going to make, you know, Little Star's mooncake right now. So and she encouraged everyone to put their flour and sift, and put the sugar, sprinkle, 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 all these things that go into a bowl. And they made a mooncake. And she actually had a big demonstration of this really fluffy, pillowy mooncake. And then as Little Star would come out at night, she would nibble, nibble, nibble. So then slowly the mooncake started to get smaller. But more importantly, it was turning into the phases of the moon. So that was a really exciting thing there to see an author also demonstrating some storytelling techniques like that. All the other ones that I have here, Vincent paints his house, is very similar to the paintbrushes that I had, but he's painting his home. And then Hooray for Hat would be a great one, because then you can wear a bunch of hats, and then as you pass them out to different characters, you make them happy. So yeah, lots of really great things here that I hope that you get to take a look and find in your collection something that fits all of these methods, techniques, and ideas. Now, if you have any questions, my information is right here. Here's my email. If you're also interested in the PDF of the StoryMakers presentation that I did for the staff training, I can send that, as well as the lesson plan. The lesson plan has some of the things we have here, but it has now developed into other items. But upon request, you can email me and I can send that to you so you can see how that was structured in a lesson plan for our staff. Okay, everyone. So I have a chat in of a question. It says, your props are so creative. Do you have any go-to places for inspiration? So in terms of that, I know that it feels, I definitely try to see what's on Pinterest, or like what's on other blogs and things like that. But for the most part, a lot of my inspiration is desperation of like trying to figure out, okay, this is what I have. What can I do with this? And also in consideration of what might be in a parent's home. So my inspiration is actually the parents. So where I have to think, you know, if I'm in the parent's home, do they have some of the things that I am recommending? And if they don't, how can I then bring that out so that it is easy? And then I get the parents like excited to say, listen, look, I can do this with just 3 items that you can find at home. You can do the same. It doesn't have to look fancy. It doesn't have to look anything amazing. But another inspiration are actually my staff librarians, because during the training, they had so many ideas and so many things that I was like blown away. And some of this is hard, but it really was great. So a lot of inspiration comes from the staff that I interact with at NYPL, who brings in more ideas for me to better get creative. So another question I have, if you're doing in-person storytelling, do each of the participants receive their own transparencies? Yes. So we did have, so like I said, a stack of transparency sheets are like, there's 500 of them, so more than enough. And we did have the transparency sheets for parents to be able to have between, like I said, 5 and 6 transparency sheets that during the workshop, they would utilize our chalk markers, our permanent markers, to be able to draw on top. So they could take that home. And we did tell them that it's very easy to wipe it off with permanent marker on transparency sheet. You can use hand sanitizer in order to remove. And so they took it home, but then we also said, you know, there are other ways that you can use transparency sheets with like a Ziploc bag and things like that. So as you are telling the stories, do you show the book and turn the pages, or do you just show the book and then do your own storytelling? So here's the thing, and it's really up to you how you want to do it. But I normally don't use the book because I probably already read the book before, right? So these are my well-loved stories that I have told all the time with the book. But with a new audience, sometimes the book is a little difficult. So instead of the book, then I tell just with the props. So my way of doing it, I usually start immediately with the storytelling and the props, and then let parents know, guess what? This is actually a book, and you can check this out from the library, take it home, and then retell the story now from the book. So it's very easy to do one or the other. But I usually have the book on display and then just do the materials in front of them, do the storytelling in front of them. Oh, great. It says, you did such a great job on camera. Any tips on being engaging via Zoom for online story times? Yeah, definitely. So in terms of using props with virtual story times, and especially if you have the participants with you, is really taking the time for them to focus on what you have at hand. So a lot of it within the camera, there's a lot of things that you can hide. As you can see, I literally have all my props just like hanging out here. So there's a lot of things you can hide and have them all in order and ready for you to grab and go. There's a lot of things that that if you just put in the camera frame, makes it very easy. And for myself, when I'm pacing and I'm getting the reaction, I actually go a lot slower in the virtual setting than I do if I'm in front of an audience because of this barrier, virtual barrier that you have between the screen and your participants. So going slower and asking the kind of questions like I said, who do you think wears bracelets in this story? And then giving pause. Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe it's that. Well, you know who it is? It's actually the farmer's wife. And then I do. And then also encouraging a lot of the participants to do the movements with you. So when I had this, you can say, let's jingle our arms to show that the farmer's wife is coming to help. And we're going to put our hands on the shoulder, and we're going to put our hands out in front of us, and we're going to pull and pull and pull. So with virtual, there's a lot of we. There's a lot of we're going to do this. Let me see, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to check the next pocket. Oh, and we're going to reveal. So that does a lot of things to bring it all together. Awesome. If there are no other questions, let's see. Thank you so much. Such a different way of looking at working with your patrons in a creative way. Yeah, definitely. Particularly with virtual, there's a lot of things that now you can do that you wouldn't have otherwise thought about doing in person. Like this is literally a jar with flannel inside. I would not really want to have this at the library, a glass jar. But utilizing now this little screen, there's a lot of mystery involved, and there's a lot of surprises that can happen. Like when I did dip, dip, and now it turned into purple. Whereas if you did that in person, you would have to just be a little more sneaky with maybe a bag or things like that. So yeah, when definitely transitioning from virtual to in person, it can be very minor, but it can be done. So a lot of these props can still be done and utilized in a really great way. and encouraging the parents to also make their own and try this out, to open up the senses, open up the movement and activity, and having everybody involved in the storytelling. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. And I'm really excited to hear from y'all if you have any questions. And I want to thank Nyla also for letting me be here today and show you all the wonderful things that we had going on at NYPL for storytelling and interactive engagement. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jessica, and thank you to the youth service section. This concludes the NYLA 2020 on-demand program, Storytelling Off the Page. We hope that you continue to take advantage of all the on-demand and live programs that the NYLA 2020 virtual conference has to offer. Thank you for helping to make this the best virtual conference ever.